Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're not just looking at another business success story. We're really digging into a foundational moment for modern cannabis culture. We're tracing how an underground art form essentially met, well, regulatory compliance and changed cannabis extraction forever. Our sources today take us right back to the origins, the standardization of what everyone now calls solventless extraction. And if you're someone who appreciates those complex, clean flavors in, say, high-end hash or live rosin, well, you really need to grasp the groundwork that made this whole commercial category even possible. So our mission today is to understand that shift, how traditional hash, which was often just seen as, a rough byproduct maybe.
Yeah, something left over.
Exactly, how that got transformed into this highly valued, rigorously controlled product that really defines modern dabbing culture.
And, when you talk about that transformation, you absolutely have to talk about Nicholas Tandem. He's known everywhere as Nikka T. The sources, they all point to him. He didn't just ride this wave. He arguably named it. He helped write the rule book, the SOPs. And he set that initial compliance standard that, well, everyone else ended up following.
What's really striking is just how bold that challenge was back then. You had early legalization, right? But there was this huge gulf between the amazing stuff enthusiasts were making.
And what the state regulators needed.
Yeah.
Totally different world.
Totally different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about taking what was essentially basement bubble hash, sometimes incredible quality, made with real care but zero oversight, and turning that into, like, boardroom SOPs. Think about it. No standard procedures, no agreed-upon language, and honestly not much trust yet from the government side. This deep dive is really about the person who helped build that bridge, create the infrastructure to make that trust viable.
Okay, let's unpack that journey then, because his philosophy, it didn't start in a lab coat. We need to go back to Northern California.
Right, his background is critical here. He grew up totally immersed in that NorCal cannabis community vibe. But his first public identity wasn't as an extractor. It was Selecta Nikka T. He was a DJ, a Bay Area DJ, blending reggae beats at late-night sessions. And that grounding, in culture, community, rhythm, even precision in sound, it seems like it transferred directly to how he approached hash. The craft always came first.
Ah, that's interesting. So this idea of extraction as a precise craft, not just, churning something out, that really got cemented somewhere else, internationally.
Yeah, the sources really highlight his time in Amsterdam, specifically his time learning from Mila Jansen.
The hash queen.
The hash queen, exactly.
Yeah.
That was like his formal education in pure traditional water hash methods. It really solidified this belief that water hash wasn't just some byproduct of trim. It was, or could be, the ultimate expression of the plant itself, a craft.
Okay, so he absorbs this, old world European craft idea. And he brings it back right into the very new, very uncertain American regulated scene. So 2009, he starts Essential Extracts in Colorado, and the goal was specifically to push this high-quality ice water hash into the legal channels.
Precisely. It was intentional. And this is where the story gets, well, kind of historic pretty fast. Within just a year, 12 months, Essential Extracts hits this major milestone. They become recognized as the first licensed hash company in the entire U.S.
Wow. Okay, first, that doesn't just mean they got a piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
They basically had to invent the process for getting licensed.
That's exactly it. In an industry with no playbook, being first means you are the standard, at least initially. Essential Extracts had to create their own internal standard operating procedures, their SOPs, that regulators would actually accept. They had to prove that these water-based methods, which were often seen as kind of gray market, could actually be compliant, repeatable, scalable within the rules. They essentially wrote the first draft of the compliance template that other companies in Colorado and then later other states would look to.
Okay, so they nailed down the compliance part. Huge step. But they still had a fight on their hands commercially, didn't they? Early 2010s? The market was being flooded.
Oh, absolutely. Consumers weren't necessarily focused on purity back then. Price and novelty were big drivers. And when Essential Extracts was starting up, dab culture was just completely dominated by hydrocarbon extracts. BHO, butane hash oil, often sold as shatter.
Right, BHO is everywhere. Cheaper, easier to make, maybe?
Cheaper, yeah, and blasted out pretty easily. But its reputation, well, it wasn't always great. There were real safety concerns about leftover solvents if it wasn't purged properly.
So the challenge was double-edged. Prove you're safe and legal to the government and convince consumers that your potentially pricier product was fundamentally different and better. How did they cut through all that BHO noise?
It really came down to language, terminology. They needed a word that immediately set them apart from BHO. If BHO was defined by its chemical process, their method needed to be defined by the accents of that process.
And that leads us to Nikka T's big contribution to the cannabis dictionary. He coined solventless for dabbable water hash.
Yep. It seems simple now, but it was kind of a brilliant bit of marketing, almost linguistic warfare. By defining the product by what it lacked, solvents, he instantly created this perception of higher safety, higher purity. It drew a very clear line in the sand. This versus that.
Okay, that makes sense. But then why use terms that sounded like the competition? The sources say he popularized solventless wax and solventless shatter. Wouldn't that just confuse people?
You'd think so, but it was actually really clever marketing. Think about the average dab consumer back then. They knew what wax felt like. They knew the texture of shatter.
Right, those are familiar forms.
Exactly. So by putting solventless in front of those familiar terms, Nikka T basically gave consumers a map. It allowed them to connect the texture they already understood to this new, cleaner method. It eased the transition. It essentially said, hey, you like shatter. Here's a version made super clean, just water and ice. It immediately positioned high-quality hash as competitive, but also safer.
Okay, that's smart. So he's shaping the language, shaping the market perception.
Yeah.
But he also pushed the actual technique forward in a massive way, right? Let's talk about fresh frozen.
Ah, yes. This is probably his most lasting technical legacy. And understanding why it matters is key. Traditionally, cannabis gets dried and cured before anyone processes it. Curing is great if you're going to smoke the flower.
But not so great for extracts.
Terrible for preserving the most volatile compounds. Those delicate terpenes that give you the unique flavor and aroma. They start degrading, evaporating almost immediately during drying and curing.
So you lose the real, vibrant essence of the living plant.
Precisely. So around 2010, maybe 2011, Nikka T and the team over at Denver's Pink House started experimenting. They pioneered these workflows using live, uncured plant material, chopped down and immediately frozen. That's the fresh frozen input. This technique basically freezes time for the terpene profile. It locks in that full, volatile bouquet, preserving a flavor experience that was, frankly, completely new and much more intense for the market.
And this wasn't just a minor tweak. This fresh frozen approach fundamentally changed the potential quality of hash, didn't it?
It absolutely did. What started as these trials quickly became the gold standard, the non-negotiable standard for top-tier quality. Today, that technique, it's universally seen as the bedrock of solventless excellence in basically every serious lab. If you're making high-end solventless, you're washing fresh frozen, period. It's how you guarantee that terpene preservation, that clean, true-to-the-living plant flavor.
Wow. So, okay. He gets the business compliant, he defines the terms for the market, he sets the technical gold standard with fresh frozen. That's quite a trifecta. Let's look at how this influence was recognized, the awards.
Right, because Essential Extracts wasn't just playing the game, they were winning it consistently. They racked up over 15 cannabis cups. And we're not talking generic wins. These were for specific complex products, like first place for White OG solventless wax in 2014, then first place for Chem Diagonal rosin batter in 2016. It shows they kept innovating, kept refining.
And that culminated in the High Times Visionary Award in 2018, which is a pretty big deal.
A huge deal. The awards definitely validate the product quality. But I'd argue the deeper impact was on the infrastructure of making hash itself. Essentials gear, their specific wash bags, the tools they used, and crucially, their documented SOPs. They didn't just win trophies for the product, they set the benchmark for the process globally.
How does that actually happen, though? How does one company's internal toolkit become the standard for everyone else worldwide?
Well, it's partly being first, being successful, and partly being willing to share the knowledge.
Yeah.
If Essentials' method was proven by regulations, proven by cup wins, then other labs naturally wanted to copy it. They wanted to replicate the inputs, the process, the outputs. Nikka T, in effect, provided the blueprint, the instruction manual, the specs for the equipment needed for top-quality washing. He set the bar for what other washers aim for, first across the U.S., then internationally.
He really did become this sort of global teacher figure for Solventless. The sources show his role shifting from primarily making product to consulting all over the world.
Yeah, that's a big part of his work now. He advises internationally on lab design, helps companies refine their SOPs for different legal frameworks, and even gets into really specialized stuff like wash-friendly cultivar selection.
Meaning figuring out which specific strains of cannabis are best suited for water hash extraction.
Exactly. Which genetics yield the best quality and quantity of trichomes for washing. It's about optimizing the whole chain, from seed to final product.
And he's channeling that expertise into formal education too, right? Contributing to the Ganjier curriculum.
Yes, he created modules for the Ganjier program, which is significant. It's about professionalizing and standardizing the knowledge base for this craft on a global scale.
It shows a real commitment to preserving the integrity of the process he helped define.
Absolutely. And Essential Extracts is still operational, now expanding into markets like New Jersey. Nikka T himself keeps pushing innovation. You see things like cold cure live rosin, all-in-one vape pens, but it always seems rooted in that core philosophy. He still keeps bases in Colorado and Humboldt County, traveling constantly, teaching, ensuring those craft standards don't get diluted.
In that core philosophy you mentioned it earlier, it really sums it all up. Hash without shortcuts, culture without compromise.
That phrase just nails it, doesn't it? It encapsulates his entire journey and impact. He took that craft ethos, that focus on purity he learned back in Amsterdam from Mila, and he managed to successfully blend it, synthesize it, with the really demanding compliance needs of the U.S. legal market. Crucially, he didn't seem to sacrifice the quality just to scale up. Instead, he used the standards of quality as the very basis for scaling up responsibly.
Which leads us to a really interesting, maybe provocative final thought here. Nikka T's whole mission, in a way, was to make hash competitive. He did that by defining quality through rigorous standards, technical excellence, compliance. He professionalized the craft. But now that those standards he champions, solventless, fresh frozen, are being adopted and industrialized by huge commercial operations, what happens to that original ethos? How do you maintain that commitment to hash without shortcuts when the entire process is being optimized, maybe solely for massive volume and lower costs? That feels like the tension, the challenge for the next wave of extractors and for the culture itself.